We're going to talk about how you develop your setting's personality and make sure that personality shows up in the story. We're going to talk about how you intertwine setting and character so that your story's setting makes the character richer and helps define them. And we're going to talk about how you use setting as a plotting tool for creating unique stories. We are not going to talk about how you determine what kind of life can evolve on a planet based on how far it is from the sun, or any of the other astrophysical details. There are websites that will go into this in incredible detail for you if you need it. I can recommend a couple books that will talk about how to design an alien, but we're not going to talk about it here. We're not going to talk about how you research foreign locations with accuracy, although Google Maps is really great for getting started. And we'll talk more about where you might go if you needed help researching a location. We're not going to talk about designing magic systems or alien cultures, and I can give you references on that. But those are all things that there's tons of information on. We're going to talk about the things that you don't often see talked about that go into a little bit the structure of your book and how character growth arcs work and how you can use setting to do things with character that are much more interesting and impactful. So I've created two settings. I could have kept it simpler with one, but there's a difference sometimes in what you do with the setting when you're creating something light and comic versus something dark and dramatic. And I created two kind of extreme settings here that are kind of opposite ends of the poles because I wanted to make sure we cover both of the things you do depending on what kind of a story you write. And of course, your setting could be somewhere in between the spectrum, but I just wanted to make it really clear how the techniques might be different for these two different types of settings. So first, we're going to look at Quirky Town. It's going to be kind of a small town. We're going to try and create the Cheers effect with it. It's going to be a place where readers feel accepted and safe and home. It's one of those places where everyone knows your name and everybody's a little offbeat and weird, but it's cool. And this kind of setting is fantastic for fiction that's comedic, for fiction that gives you a feel-good kind of story or that has heartwarming moments in it. And for the sake of illustrating how we're going to work with character, we're going to work through a story about a burned out executive. She was an entrepreneur and she went to the big city to start a business, and she was successful, but then there was a hostile takeover, and she's kind of feeling like she's crashed and burned. She's coming home to the small town she grew up from, that she grew up in, and kind of trying to make peace with what she perceives as being her failure. The other setting we're going to look at is Danger City. We're going for kind of a feeling more like Gotham City, where the criminals kind of have everybody else scared and justice is hard to come by. And this is going to be a great setting for a thriller or a mystery, something noir, or some sort of dark story that explores humanity's basic nature. Could be great for like action adventure or a redemption story. And in terms of setting up a premise, we're going to have a woman who's finally saved up enough money to move her family out of Danger City to a better place. And she comes home from that last business trip and discovers that the big crime boss in town has killed her husband and children. It's going to be a vigilante revenge story. So two really different stories, and I'm hoping that the difference between them is going to kind of help illustrate different things that we can do with setting. So you probably already know this, that reading is a cheap vacation, and you have to ask yourself, why would a person want to visit your story's world? Now, these are not the only appeals that a setting is going to have, and it's not the only appeals that you'll find in a story, but these are some of the common, really broad ones, and you'll have more specific appeals that you'll look at as you develop the details of your story and the details of your setting. So the 7 types that you want to consider and possibly even use in your marketing efforts, because these 7 appeals are going to be things that draw your particular kind of reader into your story. Wonder is a setting that's exotic. You're showing them something else that they've never seen before. Novelty, there's something that you can't see or do anywhere else. There's people that you can't meet anywhere else. You have to go to this setting in order to see or do or meet these people. Wish fulfillment. There's someone that you can't be anywhere else. You have to go to this setting if you want to be a particular kind of person and have a particular kind of experience. Thrill ride. There's going to be dangers in the setting that you won't find anywhere else. Secrets. There's something to be discovered in the setting that can't be found anywhere else. Taboo breaking. There's something that in real life you would never ever do, whether it's because you wouldn't or you've been forbidden to do it by your society, but you'd like to experience it vicariously. And then education, getting to see something and learn something, maybe about an era that you were born too late to experience, or some arena of life that's close to you. Like, I'll never know what it's like to be a heart surgeon. I'll never know what it's like to be an award-winning surfer, but I could read a book and kind of sort of get a taste of that life that I'll never have. And readers definitely love education too. So knowing what the broad appeal of your setting is tells you something about your target reader, and knowing who your target reader is tells you what the broad appeal of your setting should be. So let's look at different types of fiction and different types of appeal. If you're going for wonder, that would be a great appeal for a murder mystery set on a space station. The thrill of that could actually be what it's like to live on a space station, and how different it is to be in space than it is to be on Earth. And that might be the big draw of your story. The murder mystery might just be interesting to the reader, but it might be that it's set on a space station that causes them to buy the book. A story that shows readers what it's like to climb Mount Everest might be heavily drawing on novelty. That might be people just wanting to know what it's like to go to Nepal and climb that mountain and deal with oxygen deprivation, and you're going to be freezing to death, and sticking your ice pick into ice and triggering an avalanche. I mean, there's all these really exciting experiences that maybe you wouldn't want to have to actually live through, but the novelty of it could be the draw of your story. Wish fulfillment. Harry Potter lets you imagine that you are a wizard at wizard school. You can't be that in reality. The only way you can be it is if you read a really good book that takes you there. A thrill ride. If you're reading a spy thriller, it gives you the vicarious adrenaline rush of being hunted by enemy agents and being on your own and not being able to trust anyone, and like indulging in a little paranoia just for fun. And you know, in real life, I wouldn't want to do that, but it's sure fun to read about. Raiders of the Lost Ark was a great example of a story in a setting where secrets were actually the big appeal. Getting to see one of the most famous lost artifacts in history, and not just in getting to see it, but getting to see it in action. That was one of the really fun things about Raiders of the Lost Ark. It wasn't the only appeal, but it was one of the big ones. Taboo breaking. A story about women escaping from a brothel lets the reader understand the experience of someone being forced to break the taboo against prostitution, something that you probably definitely wouldn't want to experience in real life, but it could be fascinating to learn about it. It could help you understand what other people are going through and why it happens. So it's a taboo breaking that borderlines on educational. It might change your opinion about the taboo one way or the other. And then Gone with the Wind isn't just an epic love story or an epic tragedy. It's also a window into life in the South during and after the Civil War. And I had read a fair amount about the Civil War before I read Gone with the Wind, but it really brought home a lot of things that I didn't understand about the Civil War just from reading the history books, like what people went through and how terrible a war it was, how it affected everybody on a really personal level. It's wonderful for that, like education into what the culture of the South was before and after the Civil War. And people read for all these reasons. Your setting and your story could have multiple appeals. It's really good to know what the primary one is, though, because that is the one you want to hit hard in your marketing, and that is the one you want to make sure you really take advantage of your setting to cultivate that appeal in every aspect of your story that you can. So you want to ask yourself, what is my setting's primary appeal? What's the biggest thing that's going to draw readers in? And then look at the secondary ones and say, I don't want to overshadow that primary appeal because I want to please my target reader, but also I want to look at how I can incorporate the secondary appeals in there in ways that are going to make the story more fun, or that are going to make the characters more interesting, or that are going to support my theme. So looking at our two locations, Quirky Town has the appeal of novelty. There's going to be a lot of oddballs there. They're going to be very lovable, and it's going to be exaggerated. In real life, there's not that many oddballs all living in one small town. at least maybe not as many lovable ones as we're going to find in there. And the wish fulfillment aspect of finding a safe refuge from all of life's unpleasantness, where you can be accepted for who you are. There are a lot of places that don't necessarily feel 100% safe where you can be completely honest, but we're going to create that with Quirky Town so readers have this kind of refuge where they can go and they can feel loved and accepted. That's the appeal we want to go for. But which one of these are going to be primary? It depends on what kind of story I'm writing. If I'm going to try and write a funny story, I would emphasize the novelty because all the humor is going to come from those quirky characters, and that's what readers are going to come for. Whereas if I'm writing a heartwarming story, maybe a love story with a lot of feel-good moments, I'd be emphasizing that wish fulfillment aspect of it being a safe refuge. I would still have the quirky characters in there, but I wouldn't let them steal the show from that whole experience of being accepted, because in a heartwarming story, I know that's what my target readers are looking for. So looking at Danger City, I see multiple appeals for a setting like that. Novelty, it's completely lawless. It's very Wild West. It's not like most towns that you go to today unless you're going into a really bad neighborhood, which is unfortunate. There are places that are that lawless. And we as a society need to work on that, but also there are certain stories that you can tell that are really fun to read when you have a place where anything could happen and everything is dangerous. Every corner holds another danger. So that's the novelty appeal. There's a wish fulfillment appeal there. It's a place where you can be an action hero. Danger City is a place where the police have kind of given up and the criminals are in charge, and they all have their own turfs. So any place you go, you're not worried about, as a reader, you're not worried about getting caught by the police. You're worried about like dealing with people that you're having to deal with. And as part of a thrill ride, there's the adrenaline rush of going up against impossible odds and risking your life. That's another big appeal for thrillers and mysteries and that kind of fiction. And there are people who will consider that to be the main thing that makes them want to read a book. And then taboo breaking, a place where you have the chance to take the law into your own hands and you decide what's right and wrong. And in real life, that doesn't usually work out so well. But like as a fantasy, it's a very satisfying taboo to break. So those are all things that your story could emphasize if you were writing something in Danger City. Which one's primary? If I was writing a story with a focus on vengeance, I'd probably emphasize that taboo breaking, like the fantasy of taking the law into your own hands and like you being the one to make things happen the way you think they should. Whereas if I were writing this story with a focus on the character's growth arc, where the character maybe needs to move past revenge and defeat the boss to help other people as opposed to just because they're mad, I'm probably going to emphasize the wish fulfillment of being a hero because that gives me an opportunity to explore what being a hero really is. So it's going to support the growth arc, and it's still going to give me that heavy emphasis on wish fulfillment that's going to make readers who want to be heroic more interested in the story. So when you're creating a setting, you want to create something that readers love to visit. And you would think that that would mean it would just be an amazing place. And sometimes it is. Like there are fantasy worlds that readers love to visit just because there are wonders everywhere and it's so cool and there's so amazing, many amazing people working together and doing interesting things and doing cool magic. But a setting really doesn't have to be a paradise for people to want to spend time there. And in fact, in most of the settings from fiction that people are obsessive about, the setting is actually kind of a horrible place. And the reason for that is that even though the setting is awful, those settings also provide an opportunity for a very powerful emotional experience. Awful settings with great opportunities for intense emotional experiences. If you are being oppressed by an evil empire, that is such a good opportunity to stick it to the man and to be the one that stands up and is defiant. And if that's something that's like a personal fantasy for you, you're going to love stories where people are being oppressed by some higher evil authority. The zombie apocalypse. Hate to live there, but it's such an opportunity in fiction to prove that you're a badass vicariously by reading about badass characters killing zombies. Alien invasion, again, I wouldn't want to live through that, but it's such an opportunity to create a hero or a set of characters that can be heroes and give your reader the vicarious experience of saving Earth. So setting gives your protagonist an opportunity to be a hero and your reader to vicariously experience heroism or to be extraordinary in some way. It doesn't have to be heroic in the traditional sense of the word. In fact, a lot of stories, there are some really good ones that are incredibly intense that are about someone who's not heroic, who doesn't have those traditional qualities, and they still have this experience of having these moments of vulnerability and honesty and personal change, and they can even be sometimes more intense than the traditional heroic journey. Some more terrible settings that have great opportunities for intense emotional experience. And again, you'll notice these are all settings that are going to put your characters through the ringer emotionally. A murder investigation is an opportunity to outsmart a killer. A broken marriage is an opportunity to reconcile or to break free of a terrible situation. A boarding school where there are tons of bullies is an opportunity to stand up for yourself. So even in the most mundane settings, if you understand the opportunity that setting offers your reader for an intense emotional experience, you have a tool for deepening your story. So first things first, before I really try and develop a setting, the very first thing I ask myself is what opportunities are there here in this place to give my reader an intense emotional experience? What kind of emotional experience is it? What opportunities are there in this place for my characters to do something heroic or do something extraordinary or in some way go way outside of their comfort zone and do something that they would never do before? Because those painful situations and those situations where everything is going wrong are the opportunities for amazing stories. So looking at Quirky Town, the reader has an opportunity to be accepted for who you are and to feel safe. It's basically a refuge. That's the opportunity there. The protagonist has an opportunity to make peace with the people she left behind and to heal the split in her own psyche. Her growth arc is going to be competition versus cooperation, and vicariously the protagonist's opportunity is the reader's opportunity. So this is not necessarily the biggest draw, but it's still an opportunity for the reader to wrestle with their own feelings of competition versus cooperation and their desire to be a lone wolf versus fitting in, and to kind of have the honest, painful moments that you have to reconcile those. So the protagonist's opportunity is the reader's opportunity also. And finally, the setting itself has an opportunity. The setting has the opportunity to have its problem solved by this educated, skilled protagonist who's coming back to town, and I decided I would set it up as a beloved family business in town that is failing. So the setting itself, if you can get the reader to see the setting in a cool way so that they're attached to it and so they care about the setting, they love the people in this town, when they see the town having a problem, they're also going to have the opportunity to root for the town and to be happy and want to stand up and cheer when the protagonist helps the town solve its problem. So there's three opportunities here for intense emotional experience. And one of them is just directly at the reader level, and two of them are going to be vicarious for the protagonist, and the setting being two things that the reader is going to be identifying with simultaneously and vicariously living through. If you look at Danger City, again, we have some opportunities. For the reader, it's going to be an opportunity to vicariously face down overwhelming odds and intense personal danger and to see huge injustices overcome. So that adrenaline rush is going to be fun and intense, but it's going to be safe. We're going to get the reassurance as readers that good prevails even when evil is more powerful. It's going to be a David and Goliath story, and the reader is going to have that experience of seeing a bully punished. And all four of those things are very intense emotional experiences for people, and the reader is going to get that just by reading the story, if we do it right. Also, the protagonist is going to have the opportunity to avenge her family's deaths and to make the city safer for other families, to be a hero, to make her family's deaths mean something. And of course, the reader is going to get to have that intense emotional experience vicariously. And then finally, the setting is going to have an opportunity to shake free of the crime boss's stranglehold. By virtue of the vigilante influencing the setting, there's going to be a chance for other people in this setting to follow the protagonist's example and take control of their own lives and fight back. So that's another intense emotional experience that people in this setting will have that the reader can have vicariously once they've bonded with this setting and the people in it.